This episode is sponsored by the Pisgah Coaching Institute, founded by IFS-trained master coach Brian Jadon, who has been a pioneer in the integration of IFS and coaching for more than 2 decades. You can work with an IFS-informed coach who personally trained with Brian to clarify and live into a vision of any kind. Check out PCI's affiliate coaching program at pisgahcoaching.com. That is PISGAH coaching.com. Welcome to Season 6 of the One Inside an Internal Family Systems podcast. I'm Tammy Sollenberger, author of The One Inside 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about their inner world and who have a desire to connect to that authentic self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I am super excited today to have my friend Ruth Culver on the podcast. Ruth is a level 3 trained and certified IFS practitioner based in Brighton, UK. She works with adolescents, adults, and groups in private practice. After 25 years in charity event management, which sounds interesting, she burned out, retrained as a hypnotherapist, then found IFS in 2017. Her passion for embodiment and externalization has led to 3 IFS integrations, and so many people know about this, which I can't wait to talk about. Number 1, the Survive and Thrive Spiral, which many people probably have seen on Facebook. 2, IFS Constellations, and 3, Drawing into Self. I think we could probably have 3 podcasts on every single one of those things because they're so amazing. So why don't we start with, which I know I already said this, but let's tell everybody where you are in the world and what you see when you look out your nearest window.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm really honored to be here. I love your podcast, and I'm honored to be with all the people listening as well. So I'm in Hove, which is it's attached to Brighton, which is on the south coast of the UK. Go due south from London, you hit the sea, and that's where I am. And I'm about 8 minutes walk from the sea, which I absolutely love. And looking out of my window, well, it's dark here now because it's the evening, but normally I can see my garden, and I just moved house a few months back because I've got a garden here, and I can't wait to get going and growing my vegetables, and it's just so lovely to go out there between clients and ground myself and be out in nature right on my doorstep.
I love that. And then you're close to the sea. So that's got to be amazing to be able to walk and smell and just take that in. So why don't we start by talking about the Survive and Thrive Spiral? And I'm going to pull it up for me, and I recommend people pull it up if they can.
And maybe it's even the first thing to say is you can download it for free from my website, which is calmheart.co.uk. So it's there, and it's there in 18 languages now. So it's a graphic, it's on one page. And just so people can imagine it, I'll describe what it looks like. So it's got 3 big bands, a top band, which is in red, a middle band, which is in yellow, and a bottom band, which is in green. So it's like traffic lights. Then there's 3 different columns. On the right-hand side, that column is all the wording and different sections of the polyvagal system, the nervous system, when we're activated or coming back down into a nice regulated state. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. And then on the left-hand side, there's another column, and that's the column which outlines all the IFS. So it's how these aspects of IFS, the different ways that protectors behave, and the self-led area at the bottom in the green, how they map together. So you've got this nervous system on one side, the psychological, so you've got the psychological system on one side, and the nervous system in terms of the physiological system. It's how those 2 systems map together, and we can start to see how they're not separate. They're completely interrelated. They kind of feed each other. They come out of each other. And I think what it does is helps people understand that these protectors' activities and the exiles, which are holding feelings, and then this wonderful self-led and the self itself, are part of the way our nervous system works. So in the middle, there's a spiral. That's why it's called the Survive, Thrive Spiral. There's this spiral shape, and I chose the spiral as a shape because it shows that it's a continuum. We're not just in one place. There's always movement. You can go up and go down, spiraling basically away and up out of this grounded place of self at the bottom, which is the dark green. There's a section of dark green, which is pure self. And if we spiral up and away from that, first of all into I must, because these words in the centers of this center column as well. Maybe I should slow down and describe what that is. So in the center column, we've got at the bottom this semicircle of dark green, as I said, which is I am. That's the self. It's just a place of being, not doing. Just this resource of compassion and calm and connection. And when we're self-connected, when we're self-led, there's this I can, which is the next bit up. So there's some nervous system activity in that we're doing things, but it's self-connected. A feeling of I can. And you go a little further up into the fight-flight area, which is the yellow band, where we've got a need to fix things. So we've got the fix protectors coming in the IFS language, and we've got the fight-flight called hyper-aroused, sympathetic nervous system seeking safety via action. I must are the words in the middle there, and the yellow. This feeling of I've got to fix this to sort it out. So we can see our protectors are busy actively doing something, and it's quite adrenalized. You go further up the spiral, and I'll go straight up to the red at the top, and then I'll come back to where the exiles are. So right at the top, there's this feeling of I can't. And it's the furthest away from the grounded self. And it's where we've kind of gone most out of ourselves, most dissociated, really, where there's a sense of submitting or even collapsing, this dorsal vagal, as it's called in the polyvagal system, where we're seeking safety but through disconnection. And so there, the protectors, which I call flop protectors, this feeling of flopping, of submitting, collapsing. The flop protectors, they're kind of taking us away through things like depression, fainting, sleeping, migraine, taking us straight out. So all the protector activities are there on the left, and all the nervous system mechanisms are on the right, and we can see how they're connected. So in the middle, on the line between the red and the yellow, there's the word freeze. And that's an arrow that leads to the I hurt circle. And that's where the exiles are. So they're kind of trapped between the dorsal flop protectors and the hyper aroused fight flight I must protectors. So they're right in the middle. It's like a reservoir of all this pain and this hurt, where the overwhelm of freeze, which freeze is a particular word in the polyvagal system. It's not the same as collapse. It's partly you've got the foot on the gas and the brake at the same time, on the accelerator, as we say in the UK, and the brake at the same time. You've got both a drive, I must, it's the deer in the headlights. I've got to do something, but it's also I can't at the same time. And then we freeze. It's like rigid, overwhelmed, and that's where the exiles, I think, really get created almost. Gets pushed into the body, all this feeling of overwhelm, panic, despair, grief, shame, and it's held in this reservoir of I hurt, which is somatically held in the body.
I love it. I love it so much. And you did a great job explaining it. And I recommend everyone pause and go get this and print it off. It's beautiful. And so how are people using this? It's been translated into 17 language. What are you hearing? How are you hearing people using this amazing resource that you've created?
Yeah. Well, I first created it for my own clients. I was working in groups, and I think I found polyvagal about the same time as I found IFS. I don't know, 2015 or something like that. I needed to try to understand what was happening in people's nervous systems, especially when we're working in groups. Because although groups can bring this wonderful possibility for healing, they also can be really activating, especially for critic parts and shame parts and fear of being in groups. That's where a lot of people have been wounded. So I just made this graphic, and I'd seen the window of tolerance graphic, that model where it's like a burger bun, a burger in a bun. You've got the hyper arousal at the top, you've got the fight flight at the top, you've got the hypo arousal, the dorsal at the bottom, but in the middle, you've got the rested, resilient, self-led state, if you like. And I looked at this and went, no, you don't go through a lovely resilient state to go move between hyper and hypo. You that's not how it works. So that didn't work for me. I have a very structural systemic brain. Didn't work for me. So I just kind of played around with it, put it on paper for my own clients, my own workshops, so people could understand. So this leads into answering your question, how people are using it. It's the psychoeducation initially. It's like making people aware of the fact that their protectors kicking off sometimes, and often being extreme, is totally natural because it's their nervous system being activated. There's a biological reason. And that brings so much relief to go, oh, right, I don't have this condition I've been told about. It's not a mental disorder. It's my nervous system. This is why my system's acting this way. So psychoeducation is how I use it. I also use it, and other people using it as well, in an implicit way, because I think we as mental health professionals, we need to understand our own nervous system, how our parts are being activated, and what's kicking in our own nervous system terms, because of course that leaks into clients if we're in a survival state, which would be the dorsal or the fight flight. So it leaks, they can feel it. So we need to see how we can get back to this place of resilience and self-led state to work with them. But also, if we can recognize what's happening in our clients, in their nervous systems, we can meet them with the appropriate tonality, the appropriate pacing. If you've got a feisty part there that's in an absolute drive, you need to meet it with your prosody, with your speed, and then gradually bring them to a place of more self-connection, rather than meeting them with this really lovely, which is probably going to inflame them or make them dissociate even more. So it's about understanding what's going on us and going on in them, so that we can help them find a place of more regulation.
I love that, and kind of like a little bit of mirroring, like if they're in sort of the I need to fix, I need to fix, and we're kinda trying to take them into I am, then that's not gonna work.
Yeah. Yeah, we validate them with the energy that they're in at the time. That's the validation piece. And then we can start working with it.
Yeah, I love it. I'm thinking it's even really good for a unblending tool, because then if I have this image in my mind, I can really notice, okay, wait a minute, I'm in the I need to fix, I need to fix, I need to fix. Okay, wait a minute. I know on my sheet that is in let me check the color. Yeah, I need to fix, fix, fix is yellow. So I'm not in that green flow, safe, connected. I can self-led. I'm not in the green. I popped up into the yellow. Yellow is fix, fight or flight. I must, I must, I must, and all these fixing protectors. And so I can notice, oh, wait, I'm in the yellow. I can feel I'm in the yellow. So what do I need to get to what does my yellow parts need to get me back to green?
Yeah. And of course, what we need to do is know that there's nothing wrong with being in the yellow or the red. This is our nervous system. We do not want to cut out the survival mechanism that is our nervous system. The only problem is when we get stuck there and we don't have the fluidity to
Mm.
move up and down the spiral at appropriate times.
Mm.
So that's what happens with trauma, is you get stuck because at the time it happened, there were no other ways of dealing with it. So we're going back to trauma patterns here. You get stuck. You don't know the green zone even exists. So that's what we're doing with the IFS therapy, is introducing people to self and to self-led behavior. But as you said, it is helpful for unblending. And quite often, I have the chart on my wall, and if I'm working with a teenager or something, and they may be talking about how angry they are with their mom, and we're validating that. And we might just slow it down a bit or validate it a bit by going, where's that on the spiral? What is that? And they get interested and they go, oh, it's that. And it gives this kind of, it allows them to validate themselves without having to do it in a way that feels uncomfortable, especially for teenagers. And people who are really cognitive or very scientific, it really helps them understand through the body, through the nervous system as well. So we can move more into the self-connection through that route.
I love that because it's not like I'm in red and red is bad and I shouldn't be in red and let's hurry up and get down to green because that'd be a yellow part that's trying to fix the parts that are in the red, actually.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is that we can go to it through the body. So it's a really nice way in to look at body movements. So that if you're looking at flop, if you've got depression, it's kind of quite bent over. It's a good way to recognize what's going on in the body. Oh, I just wanted to get under the duvet and never come out again. That can be happening. Or if you're in fix, your head's forward, your eyes are open, you're adrenalized. So I'll show people that that's what it looks like in their body, and we can play with that a bit. And then if you're in flow, you're more kind of relaxed and spacious. You've got lovely peripheral vision. You're feeling safe. So we can start to recognize what state we're in and our clients are in, or our mother is in, or our brother is in, um, when we look at what's happening in the body. So it's a way of really um, encouraging that body listening, that body attention, that body noticing, which is so important.
I love that. I love that. And I love these like cute words of like flop. What is it? Flop, flop, fix, and flow. And so and great, just like educationally wise, the colors and the words really help kind of memorize it because you're like, it's like, oh, red, yellow, green, or flop, fix, flow. So I can notice, okay, wait, what's happening for me, whether I'm with a client or with a family member? Am I in flop, fix, or flow, or red, yellow, or green? Where am I? How's my body? What's happening for me? And then I can more clearly get a sense of what's happening for them and kind of notice, oh, okay, they are in red. And so that's so lovely when it's sort of it's not just like I'm in a part, I know they're in a part. Like it gives, I don't know, it gives me more space to be like, oh, okay, if I can notice that they're in red and I'm amping up and spiraling up to join them in the red. Um, yeah, I love that relationally.
And I was working with a client earlier today. She was, she was quite upset with herself because she was shouting at her teenager. And we sort of mapped it onto the spiral. And she really found it useful to see that the part of her who was shouting at her kid was in the yellow, trying to fix it. Yeah, okay, it's the job, trying to fix it. And then the part of her who was feeling so ashamed of being a bad mom was in the I hurt. And the part of her who was criticizing her, saying, "You're a bad mom," was also in fix. And then there was also, was describing, but when I do this, it's like I completely numb out. It's like I completely forget everything I've ever known. Ah, so there's a part coming in to block all your awareness, or what is. So we started exploring this blocking, which was more a dorsal sense of just coming into withdraw and give up. Yeah, so that's us being multiple. We can be in multiple nervous system states, different parts being in different sorry, different parts in different nervous system states at the same time.
Okay, that's so interesting. So I have, or like this client that you're talking about, she has different parts that are, I'm just repeating this, different parts that are in different nervous system states all at the same time.
Hmm.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And when we're working with really dysregulated systems, very, very complex systems, one of the things I do, and we'll talk about later, I'm sure, is the putting it on paper, but understanding those in nervous system terms can also bring a way into validation and a way out of overwhelm. Just understanding, all right, they're all trying to help as a survival mechanism.
Yeah, I love that. And then I don't wanna forget, and then we'll go to the paper. I don't wanna forget that section of "I hurt," because everything, which we know, is all working to help those exiles, and so we can name, "Okay, I'm in red, yellow, or green," and then what happens that we get to that arrow of "I hurt," and then we've got our little exiles over here. So tell me how you help people kind of really identify that all this fixing and flopping is trying to help these sweet little exiles.
Well, again, when we're mapping it onto the spiral, which we sometimes do, is just see that that's the reservoir of I hurt. And I'm a student of C. Sykes. She was one of my teachers right at the beginning, and her thing is don't go too fast to the exiles. Just send them little messages, and they'll be fine. And you need to hang out with those protectors. So we can hang out with the ones all the way around the outside, the red and the yellow, and validate that they're trying to help what's in the middle without going too close into that, without dropping into that reservoir. But at the same time, we're sending little golden threads into the reservoir and saying, I know you're there. I know you're coming. So there's the beginnings of connection that can help us to not overwhelm, not go too fast, to titrate the grief or the shame. Um, but going if we are going in there, sometimes it's a matter of getting perspective. You know how we say in IFS, look through their eyes, look through the part's eyes. Sometimes you can even go and be in there if you're getting connection with the exile and looking out and seeing the protectors around you, the flop ones or the fixed ones, or the other way around, looking from the fixed protector's part place into the exile who's in there in that reservoir. And I think what it does, Tammy, by putting it onto the graphic, it's one of these externalization tools because I work with a lot of extreme systems where things can be very overwhelming, lots of neurodivergence, lots of complex trauma. And by having it on this graphic, it allows us to titrate how close we're going. Little drops
Mm,
at a time, or pendulate in and out, in and out. Whereas if we go inside, sometimes that's too much for some people to go inside. A lot of people, certainly the ones I work with, they need a bit of time externalizing before they feel they can do that without overwhelm.
great. Okay, so the 2, um, externalizing tools that you use, does it make sense to talk about the constellations first or drawing into self first?
Mm. Well, drawing into self's my I guess my biggest passion. So let's just say a little bit about constellations first and then come onto the drawing. Would that be all right?
Perfect. That sounds great. Yeah.
Not that I don't absolutely love the constellations. I do. And all this happened by accident, Tammy. I didn't set out to do this. I was uh, poodling along, loving my IFS, and it's just the way I work. It just arrived. I think, as I say, from my own systemic brain, my own neurodivergence, my clients' needs, and these things happened. So
I love it.
constellations, it's a way of doing IFS in a group using the constellations process. So to explain what that is, the original group work was called Family Constellations, and it was created by Bert Hellinger, who went and he was a missionary, Christian missionary with a Zulu tribe, and he saw the way they were doing ancestral work. Oh, look, here already we've got a link with how we do this ancestral work in IFS. Um, and he saw them working with the external family system with ancestors through this process that he then brought to Europe and developed into a therapeutic group work that he called Family Constellations. And I studied a form of constellations that was kind of developed from that. There are quite a few different forms of it. But it wasn't until I found IFS that I found a way to work safely with constellations because they can be really overwhelming. They can also have some set pieces and sentences that kind of impose on the system, which we don't like to do in IFS. We like to find out what the system needs from the system. And we know that in IFS, although we are doing legacy work, with our starting point is the parts inside us. Shall I describe what a constellation might look like? Yeah. Well, let's start with a sculpt, because some of your listeners might well be aware of that, because it's often done in the IFS training. So a sculpt or sculpting looks a little bit like constellations, but it's different. So in a sculpt, you'd have somebody, let's call them the client, is working with, say, their parts around eating, for example. And they will describe, maybe the part that just goes to the fridge and opens it and doesn't listen to anything else and just hoovers up whatever's in there. So then they would invite somebody from the group to come and represent that part, in a very particular way, as they've described how that part stands, what the words that part says. So they're looking at it as if they're looking at a movie, and it's information that the client knows that they've described. Please do that so I can see how it is to be with that part. So that's what happens with sculpting, and then you might add more parts in the constellation of parts around that issue. Now, the word constellation simply means a cluster. It's a collection of parts, a cluster of stars in the sky in particular relationship to each other, or symptoms in an illness. So Hellinger used it for this particular type of work that involves something rather different, which is somatic information. So in a constellation, the client will describe a little bit about working with their parts around eating, and we maybe start with the one that goes to the fridge. But they don't tell people how to represent it, how to do it. They'll just sort of name it, come into connection with it, and then they'll invite somebody from the group to come and represent that part. And they just follow their intuition in who to pick. And this is where the magic starts, because they always pick the right person, someone who knows something about this for themselves. And that sounds a bit woo-woo, but I've seen it so many hundreds of times now that the person being selected, they always have this information in them. So they're not trying to do anything at all. All they do is speak about their own experience. So they're asked where they have a starting place, where to stand, and then it evolves with what comes up in the client when they're with this part, what their connection is, and more information comes from the bodies of the people there. They simply name whether they're feeling dissociated, or words will come to them, and often those words are absolutely spot on. I remember I was witnessing a constellation once, and somebody said, the part said, "We're a team. We've got to do this together. We're a team." And the client said, "Those are exactly the words. Exactly." So I don't know where this comes from. It's like people are plugging into some kind of magical Wi-Fi. I can't explain it, but if you're sitting in a cafe and somebody behind you is looking at you, you can feel them, can't you? You can't see them, but you can feel someone's looking at you. So we know there is some energy there. And I think science is increasingly proving that there's a lot of energetic stuff that we can't see but is there. So what happens as the constellation evolves, and what makes IFS constellations, or certainly the way I do them, so different from other constellations, is that just as in the IFS process, parts will come in to block or protect. You're trying to work with maybe the eating part, but in comes a shame, or in comes a critic. And that's what we need to bring in next, so that we can start to disentangle the different parts and have them all move and speak and express themselves in a way that feels right to them. It sounds a little dangerous, but what I've seen is that the more self-energy I have, the more I trust the process. It is calm, gentle, sometimes explosive, but in a safe container. And we find out information that maybe has been buried, or maybe was known, just like in an IFS session. I knew that, but I didn't really know it. So things arrive, and somehow the representatives know it. And it's a piece of magic, and it's very hard to describe.
It also sounds like it's one of those incredibly powerful experiences that happens with the witnessing, like this idea of being with that that they're with their parts and they're with you and with the group, and there's something about the withness
Yeah.
that is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's sort of three layers of work happening. There's the client doing their work, the representatives who are in the constellation doing the work of the client, but also at the same time, usually, not always, but usually doing their own work as well. Um, and then the witnesses doing the work of witnessing, holding the space, validating, whilst also doing their own work of validating their own parts who may feel that way and have those experiences. So there's all these different layers of work. And at the end of the day, people arrive, they're worried, they don't know what this is, they don't have, maybe haven't had very good experiences in groups. And by the end of the day, they're feeling connected. There's so much love, there's so much trust, there's so much hope as a result of doing this held, paced, connecting, witnessing, validating work together. It's really de-shaming.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So tell me about drawing into self.
Mm. Well, this came out of not being able to do constellations. So we went into lockdown, as you know, in 2020, and I couldn't do this group work. And I love group work. It's more affordable. It's wonderfully connecting, and we all needed more and more connection in lockdown, and I had less and less of it available. So I thought, okay, well, I'm already constellating on paper with individuals. When we're mapping their system, um, uh, using drawing. Why don't I do it with groups? So I'll just back up a little bit. It wasn't called drawing into self until I started doing it with groups. Before that, I was using this paper and pastels to follow the system, to support people to follow their system somatically, listen to their parts somatically. So what that would look like is if you're working inside, you're inviting all these parts in, and often it can be hard to get all the parts to step back and just focus on one, yeah? Especially when you've got complex systems, neurodivergence, and they might be all crowding in. There can be a sense of overwhelm. So I started increasingly using the sound tray to start to help people be with multiple parts at once, and also see the connections, interconnections, interrelationships between parts, clusters. So disentangling that, and being with the complexity. And then because I'd done some training in Gestalt creative techniques, I just intuitively started doing this drawing work, which evolved from draw that part, which is quite often around in IFS circles, to follow the energy, listen to your body, and let the part take over your arm, your hand. Let it pick its color and express itself the way it wants to express itself on the paper. It'll choose its shape, its size. It's purely non-representational, so we're not drawing butterflies and flowers. With shapes, lines, colors, so that's the energy of the part is being shown on the page. So I was doing this one-to-one and learning how to listen to the parts through the body, through the somatic information, discovering what the body wanted to say, what the part wanted to express through colors, lines, and shapes. And then moving into the witnessing, more the speaking, pendulating between making marks on the paper and then witnessing it by writing things that the part said. It says, I'm angry. Okay, you're angry. There's built-in validation happens here. Write it in a pen or a pencil next to it. And then more and more parts will come in that they show their interrelationships, and people start to see things like, oh, wow, that one's all around it, or it's hidden, or it's underneath it, or it's blocking. So you start to see them graphically set out like you would in a constellation in the room with people. So this then developed over time. I was bringing in the healing steps, different ways of doing that on paper. Then, as I say, lockdown happened. I thought, the thing, this is constellating on paper. Let's do it with a group. So I called it Drawing into Self, set up a group for 8 people for 8 weeks. Oh, it was amazing. Even in the first, I mean, of course, I learned a lot, but even in the first cohort, they had these amazing connections. It was more affordable. They got buddies for continuing to work together. They learned how to listen from self. Nobody's being the therapist. Nobody has to fix anything. So they're really connecting with their self energy to listen, to witness. And people were having their parts witnessed by somebody else, by one or by a group, without it turning into sort of bad therapy, or someone trying to, caretaking their body. So being with all of that, and at the same time being able to do to be able to connect with their work, with their parts in a titrated way, safely in a group. So yeah, it just sort of grew. And then more and more therapists came. IFS therapists came, and they started asking me to train, asking me technical questions in an experiential group. So I said, "Oh, okay, I'll do a training," and that's how it's all evolved.
And so now you do trainings for therapists for drawing into self, and then other therapists are doing these groups. So it's
Yeah, increase.
multiplied. Is that what's
Yeah,
happening? Yeah.
yeah. That's my big dream. I have a great passion for drawing to self, because I think that it's a bit scary to say, there's my parts going, "Ooh." Um, it has a possibility to take IFS out into the wider world, out of the therapy rooms, so loads more people can have access. It can go into schools and corporations and health clubs and community groups, and it brings a lightness, it brings a playfulness. I've done it with groups, this wonderful IFS project that we heard about in the conference, I think, when you were there. Jenna and Sean working in El Salvador. I've worked with people there. They're taking it to their community groups as a way of being with parts that have been so overwhelming. I mean, it's a war-torn country. There's so much trauma, but they can titrate. They can let the energy out a little bit, bring some somatic relief for things that before it was just not possible to be with. Have some witnessing by others and some relief inside their system for what's going on. And I just think that's beautiful. So for me, teaching other therapists, and you have to be IFS trained to do my training, but teaching other therapists to do it so that they can take it to other groups. Yeah, that's my primary thing now, training. And I'm also writing a book, which is quite a challenge, but it's very exciting. All that I've learned, all the many ways to do memory reconsolidation and the redo and the healing steps, and lots of different ways of working with unburdenings and legacy work, all these different things that I've learned as I've gone along, putting them into, effectively, it's a manual, which will be a manual for the training, but also people can buy it to learn if they've got IFS training. It won't teach IFS, it'll teach a way of doing IFS through this drawing work.
I love it. So when the book comes out, will you come back on and we can advertise that book for you and we can talk about it? That would be wonderful.
I'd love to. Thank you, Tammy. Yeah.
That'd be great. All right, Ruth, you are amazing. I adore you. Is there anything else that you would like to say? I feel like the last time we talked, I'm like, I'm going to sign up for every single thing you do. So that's how I'm still feeling right now. So is there anything else you want to share?
What do I want to say? Well, I do a workshop online called Experiencing the Survive Thrive Spiral, and anybody can come to that. You don't have to have any training in IFS or in polyvagal theory. I just request that people watch a couple of videos on YouTube so they get the basics of what this is. And what it does is, as an experiential way of looking at what's happening in your nervous system and with your parts. And I do that with groups of like 30 people online. I do it pretty much every month, and anybody can come. Therapists come because they use it with their clients, and non-therapists come too. Um, and then I do these constellations workshops, which and retreats. So sometimes people travel from all over the world, come to retreats. Again, anybody's welcome to those, but it is just the drawing into self, and that I offer for IFS trained people. So yeah, I like to make it available to as many people as possible.
I love that. And I think that's been something that's been so important for you to make it like
Yeah.
available, accessible, and for as many people as possible. So remind everybody where they can find out about you. Tell everybody your website again.
Yeah, my website is calmheart, all one word, .co.uk.
Perfect, perfect. And Ruth, if you weren't doing, I know you've changed jobs, and last time we talked, which people aren't gonna, they're gonna, last time you talked, but we recorded it, but we didn't publish that one. But we talked about you've changed your life a couple of times. And so if you had to do something different than what you're doing right now, what would you do differently?
Yeah, I wouldn't go backwards. I wouldn't go back to event management, and I wouldn't go back to being a jazz singer. They were great, but they're done. Um, I so love what I'm doing now, that I find this question a little hard to answer. Some of my parts are going, no. Um, but if I had to do something different, well, I mentioned my garden at the beginning. I think I'd be a gardener because I love being outside. And I think that's the one thing I don't love about my job. I'm inside too much.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Ruth, you are just a love, and I'm super excited about your book and all the things that you've already done and just what's going to happen over the next year. And it's just so good to be with you.
Oh, thank you, Tammy. It's been really good to spend the time with you.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you left a rating, a review, a like, comment, share with your family, your friends. That would mean so much to me. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or on Amazon. You can visit my website, tammysallenberger.com, or you can download a free Get to Know a Should part of you. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and at The One Inside on Facebook and on YouTube. Jeff Schrum co-produces The One Inside, and I am forever grateful for Jeff. Also thankful for Jack Reardon for creating the music, and just thank you for listening. 6 seasons, over 1 million downloads. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you in this community. I'll see you next time.